Yo, what's up everyone? My name is Yura, and I really never thought we'd be here. I know technically it's not the first meta deck I'm covering for the month of Meadowlands, but we are here today with the top of the food chain. Today, our subject is Mermail. Atlantean Mermail to be more specific. This is the top deck in the format, and it's for very, very good reason. Mermail to me is actually kind of a weird deck to talk about, not because it's a difficult deck to talk about, but more so just because it has such a reputation in Meadowlands. And I personally am not the most experienced Mermail pilot. I don't know if I ever will be. I don't play the deck a whole lot, but I do acknowledge and respect its place in the format. This is a deck that is pretty much always at the forefront of my mind when I'm trying to build new decks for the format or go back and update old decks. Mermail and GIFTuber specifically are always cards that are at the forefront of my mind when I am considering, can a deck actually find footing in this format? Because if we're treating Machina Gadget as the benchmark to beat for a deck to be rogue, Mermail is the benchmark for is a deck even remotely close to meta. And there's a lot of reasons for this. I kind of outlined Mermail in my intro to Meadowlands, but if you haven't seen that video, first of all, please go watch it. I worked really hard on that, and it is a video many years in the making, and I'm very proud of how it turned out. But Mermail has so many strengths to it. Mermail is fast, it's aggressive, it can prevent itself of being murdered immediately, it can be extremely versatile, it has so many different ways of playing the deck, it has non-engine related starters because the deck does not require its normal summon half the time. It is, without a doubt, one of the best decks in the format. And a lot of this is kind of, I don't remember which video I talked about this in, but this is kind of centralized in this idea of any deck that has engine cards in it that have multiple effects or singular effects that are just in and of itself extremely powerful and potent is a likely contender for a good deck. And Mermail has both. Mermail has cards that function incredibly well with each other. It has innate synergy with both the Mermails and the Atlanteans. It is a deck that does not rely on its normal summons, so a lot of the general cards around like Bottomless that have the potential to stop a player's combo in its tracks don't hit Mermail as hard. The generally good hand traps in the format like Veiler, Crow, and Maxi also aren't phenomenal at beating out Mermail. They're all at best just kind of decent into it, with Maxi being the most detrimental one. The main downside to Mermail is that it is extremely vulnerable to floodgates. Things like Evil Swarm Ophion, Macrocosmos, Dimensional Fissure. These are all things in the format that can really hamper Mermail's progress. But you'll notice a lot of those all require the Mermail player to go second. A Mermail deck going first has the potential to just kind of run away with the game if they get their advantage loop online. And that advantage loop is really not difficult to get online because another of Mermail's strengths is how unbelievably searchable most of this deck is. And in the version that you see on screen, this is pure Mermail. This is the variant that I have become very accustomed to playing. But if you wanted to up your consistency, there is a way to do that as well. If you wanted a normal summon that directly gets you in to one of the best starters in your deck, you can play Genex Undyne. Undyne as a level 3 water aqua monster that on normal summon sends a water monster from your deck to the graveyard to add a Genex controller from your deck to your hand. Normally, this wouldn't be all that impactful, right? Like, sure, you can dump a water monster, but you could do that with a lot of things. You could do that with like Lavalval Chain. You could do that with Foolish Burial. The reason why this is important is due to one of the main archetypes that is present in Mermail lists. And it's actually the archetype that is not present in the deck's main name. This is the Atlanteans, specifically Atlantean Dragoons. The Atlantean monsters specifically have a line of text that reads, when this card is sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, do something. Marksman targets set cards and destroys them. Heavy infantry targets face-up cards and destroys them. And Dragoons is the most important one because when it is sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, you can add any sea serpent monster from your deck to your hand. This is mostly available to you to access like the rest of your Atlantean monsters because they are all sea serpents. They're also a good way of getting access to your Deep Sea Diva, which is our main like semi-related engine normal summon, but it's not actually engine, but it is searchable by engine. But the main reason why this Dragoons ad is so important is because it gets you access to Abyss Megalo. And the reason why is because while the Atlanteans are the ones that you want to be sending for water monster effects, the Mermails are typically the ones that are going to do the sending. Both Mermail Abyss Megalo and Abyss Teus, and even Mermail Abyss Pike as well as Abyss Turge, all have effects that allow you to discard a water monster to the graveyard to do something. This will count as the cost effect, same as Undyne, but the main difference is that Undyne can send from deck to graveyard, whereas most of the Mermails, I think actually all of the main Mermails that we're playing, have to send from hand. There are other ways of triggering these Atlantean effects as well. Notably, Abyss Dweller is a very funny use case for this. Abyss Dweller detaches water monsters, in this case, for the cost, and that will trigger your Atlanteans. This can also be triggered by something like a Bahamut Shark. Really any Xyz monster that is water at this point in time, I believe will trigger your Atlantean effects, which is really funny. Most of the time, this is not going to matter. I think it does matter for, technically you can make a rank 3 with Marksman or a rank 2 with Heavy Infantry, but our rank 2 of choice is Gachi Gachi Gun Tetsu, which I don't believe triggers it. I'm not actually fully sure on that one. And then you can use Zen mains for your rank 3 of choice. I'm sure there's maybe you could run Levier, but that's not a water monster. Also, Gachi Gachi is not a water monster, so it wouldn't matter anyway. Sorry. I got a little ahead of myself. Regardless, Mermail is a deck split into two categories, discarders and discardees. There are discarders only on the Mermail side and discardees on both sides. So we're going to run through the card by card. I think this is actually one of those decks that is pretty serviceable to run through the card by card with because all of these cards do so much. And if I were to just jump around, it would be kind of a nightmare. So we're going to start off at the top of our list here with Mermail Abyss Megalo. This is the card that I mentioned that you will be searching off of Atlantean Dragoons, in addition to like your Deep Sea Divas and your other Atlantean monsters. But Megalo specifically reads as a level 7 water monster with 2400 attack. You can discard 2 other water monsters to the graveyard in order to special summon this card from your hand. When summoned this way, you can add an Abyss spell trap from your deck to your hand. Additionally, while this card is on field, you can tribute another attack position water monster, and this card can make a second attack during each battle phase this turn. Comments can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this Abyss Megalo's second effect will also trigger your Atlantean Dragoons and your other Atlantean monsters. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure this is paying cost, tributing an attack position water monster. To my knowledge, that is still paying cost. So I believe you can get some additional searches off of this as well, but I could be very wrong about that. The Abyss Megalo search, though, is really important, and it's also, of course, just a level 7 body to get on board, which will be important when we get to the extra deck. But the main reason why this search is important is because we have access to Abyss Sphere, which we're going to touch on when we get to the traps. But just know that Abyss Sphere is one of the main ways that you have access to just like prevent yourself from dying a horrible death, because it is such a phenomenal, like, holding off the frontline piece for a lot of decks. It can be really weird to get over. And it's one of the main tools that makes Mermail so difficult to kill, even when it does go first and is not pushing your teeth in. Our second main discarder, and probably the better one, is a Mermail Abyss Teus. This is another level 7 water monster that can discard a water monster to the graveyard in order to special summon this card from your hand. Notably, Megalo requires 2 discards, Teus requires 1. There is another large Mermail that you can use here. in Abyss Lead, but Abyss Lead requires 3 discards, and that is very, very difficult to set up, and for the most part is not worth it. The main reason I have found to run Abyss Lead, and it has not made its way into this list, is that it is a 2700 attack monster, which makes it just big enough to get over some really weird, annoying cards that otherwise this deck would kind of have trouble doing so unless it could get into its extra deck pieces. But back to Teus, when Teus is summoned this way, if Teus is summoned this way, you can add a level 4 or lower Mermail monster from your deck to your hand, and this is a hard once per turn. Teus searches the entire deck that is not exactly Atlanteans or the Abyss Megalo. This is going to get you access to Abyss Pike, it gets you access to Lind, it gets you access to Gund, it gets you access to Turge. It is phenomenal. There are, of course, some other names that did not make the cut into this list that I think are, at the very least, interesting, but probably not worth it. I think the big one that I wanted to talk about is Abyssdine. This card is kind of Snake Eyes Poplar if you really squint at it. It does have that Poplar effect where if it is added from your deck or graveyard to your hand by a card effect, you could special summon this card from your hand, and you must control a Mermail monster to activate and resolve this effect. If you're doing this with Teus, it will work just fine. And when this card is special summoned by the effect of a Mermail monster, i.e. its own effect, you could target a level 3 or lower Mermail monster in your graveyard and special summon that target, and this is a hard once per turn. Notably, it is a hard once per turn for both effects. It is 1 Mermail Abyssdine effect per turn and only once that turn, and I think that restriction is the thing that makes me not want to play this card, because if it could do both effects at the same time, this would be unironically not a terrible rank 3 like access, and instead what we have to do is the main way you're going to get that second effect of Abyssdine off is by using Gund to summon it, which is a little awkward because Dine can miss timing. It has that when you can effect, which is not ideal. The rest of the Mermail pool, like there are some decent cards in here, like Hilde, if sent to the graveyard, could special summon a Mermail monster from your hand, but we don't really have a lot of trouble getting them out of our hand, so it's not super important. We're not playing Abyss Mander. We don't really care about the level modulation. We don't really care about Abyss Lung. This card is not great. Nose is a thing that wins off of battle to discard when instead we could just do something else. Like, I get that if it wins combat, it summons from deck, but like we have other ways of summoning from deck that I think are just generally better. And then the rest of the Mermail names that we are actually playing, except for Lead, of course. Expanding on this, there are some other Atlantean cards, I believe, that you could play. Like, I think we have Attack Squad, but I don't want to play Attack Squad. And then there's Poseidra, which I don't want to play Poseidra. We're good on playing Poseidra, I think. The Atlanteans that are actually worth running are the Dragoons, because this is a good searcher, and Marksman and Heavy Infantry, because they are interruption and ways to break through a board. Speaking of, let's actually talk about Dragoons a little more in depth, right? So Dragoons is not only like your best send off of Gen X Undyne if you wanted to play that variant, but it's also just the best card to open alongside Teus, because Teus plus Dragoons is full combo, which is phenomenal. Like, it's really, really good. Dragoons has that adding Sea Serpent effect when it is sent to the graveyard to activate a Water Monsters effect, but it also lets all of your level 3 or lower Sea Serpent monsters attack directly, which can come up if you find yourself in a scenario where you have just, for some reason, fielded like your actual Atlantean monsters. I think the most important one here is Marksman to consider, because Marksman, when it inflicts battle damage to your opponent, allows you to special summon an Atlantean Sea Serpent from your deck that has to be level 4 or lower, so you can't get Poseidra. And this can get you into Dragoons, which then, if you wanted to, could be like attributed for a Megalo effect or something of the sort. It's also just like good for getting in for direct damage, which is not an irrelevant effect. Like, this is definitely worth keeping in mind, even if it does not come up all that much. Dragoons is one of those cards that I would never run at less than 3 copies. Same with Teus. I think these cards are way too important to run at any less than 3. You always want to see them as many times as you physically can. Dragoons specifically, because every discarder in this deck, unless you are specifically trying to eat through a board, would like to discard a Dragoons. That's like the ideal, because it replaces itself in your hand when it is used to pay the cost for a Water Monsters effect. Dragoons is just like the best discard. It's this and Gund are the best discards, but Gund requires a little bit more setup, whereas Dragoons does not. Next up, we're on One Abyss Turge. This is actually a newer addition to my list, and it's not something that I'm super confident in, but it does let you do a couple of really funny things. I think there is specifically a Meadowlands ruling that allows you to pitch Mermail Abyss Gund and then add herself back to hand, and then the Gund will trigger, I think? I'm not fully caught up on that ruling. I'm pretty sure that's how it works, which is very strange because the way you stop Atlanteans in this format is by sending them to a private information zone, which contradicts this Gund ruling, so I'm not fully certain. Again, comments, feel free to correct me. Mermail has a lot of very strange rulings associated with it because it has a lot of these really weird interactions, and there's a lot to be aware of when going into a deck like this. But Turge is a still pretty solid normal summon. When this card is normal or a special summon, you can discard a water monster to the graveyard, then target a level 3 or lower water monster in your graveyard and add that target to your hand, and that is a hard once per turn. Turge being able to cycle your hand to both plus yourself out of your graveyard and trigger the hand effects of your Atlanteans or Gund is really nice. It definitely helps you like just generally cycle your resources and keep things in hand that you want to have in hand, which is nice. It being able to recycle marksman and heavy infantry is one of the really important parts of this, I think, at the very least, just because this lets you get discard fodder in your hand that actually does something to your opponent's board, whereas sometimes you'll be stuck discarding like an Abyss Pike or something else, which is not ideal. Speaking of Abyss Pike, though, this is, in my opinion, the other good normal summon that Mermail should be on. We're at 3 copies of this card. It is very similar to Turge in that on normal or special, it discards a water monster to the graveyard, but instead of adding from graveyard to hand, it adds from deck to hand a level 3 water monster specifically. You cannot get Deep Sea Diva or heavy infantry off this, but you can get Gund or Marksman, which is totally fine. You can also get Lind here, but Lind has a much more specific use case than being in your hand. I like Pike a lot. I think Pike is phenomenal. It's one of those cards that I would not run in any less than 3 copies. It just has a lot of really phenomenal use cases and is one of the more consistent low-level discarders in the deck. Next up is Mermail Abyssland, another 3 of that I do not think I would run at any less than 3. Abyssland kind of, and I mentioned this in the intro to Meadowlands as well, kind of occupies its own little space in the deck. So Lind is not a discarder or a discard fodder. Lind occupies this spot in the deck where if it is destroyed, it summons any Mermail from deck. This is phenomenal recruiting potential, and it combos exceptionally well with a card that I was going to cover later, but I might as well cover now, Abyss Sphere. This is, as I mentioned, your search off of Megalo, and its effect allows you to special summon a Mermail monster from your deck. Its effects are negated, and you cannot activate any spell cards while this card is face up on your field. When this card leaves the field, destroy that monster, and destroy this card during your opponent's next end phase after activation. So, a lot of things that you will see happen with this card is mainly its target is going to be Abyssland. Abyssland will summon out, and either it will block an opponent's attack, or if you activate this card as your opponent attempts to go to their end phase, you can summon out a Lind from deck, and then the Abyss Sphere, when it goes to your opponent's end phase, will destroy the Lind, getting you access to a Mermail special summon from your deck. This can get you a level 7 like a Megalo or Teus, although this will not trigger their summon effects because these are both if summoned this way or when summoned this way from their hand effects, which will not trigger them. But you can instead get like Turge or Pike, which will trigger discard effects, which could get your engine even further online. Lind is phenomenal. It is such an incredible piece of this deck. It not just being a battle recruiter is the most important part here, because dying to card effects and plussing yourself is not an effect we see a lot in this format, and it functionally just means that unless this card is getting banished, you are going to be able to replace it with something, and that something should at the very least be able to tide you over until your next turn. That is the main combo you're going to be doing with Abyss Sphere. You could also use Abyss Sphere to, like, I guess, get like a Megalo or a Teus into rotation, but you don't really need to. Lind is going to be your main target for it, and for good reason. The final main deck Mermail monster that we are on is Double Abyss Gund. This is our Mermail discard fodder of choice, and it is a really, really good one. The only reason we're not running 3 Gund is because Gund on her own does not really do anything. She's only really good with prior graveyard setup, but with prior graveyard setup, this card is unbelievable. If you're in a position where you're on the back foot and you have like a Gund in hand and an Abyss Sphere getting you a Lind out, you can go the Pike off of the Lind destruction effect, and then the Pike can discard the Gund, and then the Gund can trigger in the graveyard to give you anything that you've gone through already. It is unreal. Gund specifically on discard to the graveyard can target a Mermail monster in your graveyard except itself, and special summon that target. This is a phenomenal way of getting you back into the game because it can get you access to Abyss Megalo, or even like if you haven't activated, like, or you're just trying to get to a rank 4 or something, you can get Turge or Pike. But this is a really, really great way of recycling your big bodies, and even once you get into the extra deck, can recycle Gaios, which is really nice. Gund is just phenomenal comeback potential. This card is so good past the first turn, and it can do some genuinely crazy things. It can win games that seem unwinnable. This card is phenomenal. On to the lower levels. I guess we're kind of already talking about them, but next up is Double Atlantean Marksman. As I've already mentioned, this card, when it inflicts battle damage, can special summon a level 4 lower Atlantean Sea Serpent from your deck except itself. And when this card is sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster effect, you can target a set card your opponent controls and destroy that target. Phenomenal for breaking boards. Really great into the Infernity matchup because you will most likely know where their barriers are unless they hard opened them. And this just lets you kind of target that down or force a response out of them, which is pretty nice. And the way that you can order your chains, you can make it so Marksman is always going to be the last thing that happens in that chain. So your opponent, if they have to pop a barrier or something, is going to have to negate the Marksman instead of your search effect off of like a Teos or something, which is really nice. Next up is 3 copies of Deep Sea Diva. This is our non-engine normal summon of choice in addition to our Pike and Turge. Diva just gets us access to some nice synchro plays, and while not everything in this extra deck is going to see pretty consistent summons, there are some decent things that you can do here, like Duloran bouncing spent Abyss Teos back to your hand to do again is pretty nice. But mainly it's just going to be used to get like into a Catastor to help break through a weird board, or make a Gachi Gantetsu to protect yourself for a following turn where you can then follow up with a more impactful play. The final engine card in our main deck is Atlantean Heavy Infantry. This is very similar to Marksman, where instead of targeting a set card, this will target a face-up card. Again, really solid into already established board states. This is great for board breaking, and it's just generally a phenomenal discard target. And it's also one of the main summon targets off of Deep Sea Diva alongside a Marksman. You can use this to make Armory Arm. This is how you make your Gachi Gantetsu. But also, like, in specific bad hands, Heavy Infantry is also a double summon for a level 4 or lower Sea Serpent type monster, which is not awful. It just like doesn't really do a whole lot on its own. Like, you could in theory go Heavy Infantry normal summon into Marksman normal summon, which I guess, but like meh, it doesn't really do a whole lot. It does technically have the effect, but you don't really need it. And then our final monster in the main deck is going to be the 3 copies of Effect Veiler, just because we have the room for it, and it is a pretty decent card. We then have the Holy Trinity. We have Heavy Storm, Dark Reborn alongside a Pot of Avarice because we do fill our graveyard pretty fast. The 3 copies of MST into back row decks because this deck really needs help with that. I say really needs help with it. It just like helps to break apart a board that the Mermail player is already going to be attempting to break through. So it's just kind of a nice card to have. 3 MST is just kind of a staple. 1 Book of Moon. This could be anything really. It could be Minecon or something, but I just decided on Book of Moon because I needed 1 more slot for something and I didn't want to play Abyss Lead, so I put the Book of Moon in. 3 copies of the Abyss Sphere because it is your only search target off of Megalo, and it's just generally a fine card to find going first. And then we have 1 Judgment and 1 Warning just because they are phenomenal cards. Moving on to our extra deck, we've got a couple of synchro monsters here. We've got Gungnir, which you're not really going to make alongside the Black Rose. They're just like decent cards to have access to. They're not phenomenal. You're not going to make them a whole lot, but they're not like bad cards. If you can make them, they can help in niche scenarios, but they're not really the stars of the show here. We've also got a Duloran, Tiger King of the Ice Barrier. This card does have some funny potential to make some interesting plays by using a like Abyss Pike plus a Deep Sea Diva to make it, and then bouncing whatever you summoned off of the Diva, and then like a spent Teus or something that's just kind of on your board. This can help you set up for a following turn, or if this Teus or like the Megalo is just kind of sitting on your board from a previous turn, you can use this effect again this turn to get further plays going. And for your troubles, Juloran will just get a little bit bigger. And then we're also on a Catastor and an Armory Arm as just the targets to be made using Diva, Summon Marksman, or Heavy Infantry, being 5s and 4s respectively. And then finally, we end up at probably the reason to play Mermail in the format, apart from all the other benefits to it. It has arguably the strongest archetypal extra deck monster in the entire format in Mermail Abyss Gyos. Gyos is, in a single word, phenomenal. This card does so much. It is your main play going first if you can get to it. And even the backup plan past that is still fine. But Gyos is everything. This is a rank 7 monster that requires 2 level 7 waters, which is, you know, why we play the Megalo and the Teus. But Gyos reads, while this face-up card has Exceeds material, level 5 or higher monsters cannot attack. This hurts so many decks. Just so many decks. Pretty much any synchro deck has to have a built-in mechanism to get rid of this card, or they literally cannot declare an attack ever. So that's pretty good. Additionally, as if the Floodgate effect wasn't good enough, Gyos also has a quick effect to negate all the effects of face-up monsters your opponent controls that have less attack than this card until the end of this turn. And 28, or I guess specifically 27, is kind of a weird threshold to clear in this format. It is just like generally a big number. Notably, it's not big enough to out everything. Things like Scrap Dragon and Synchro decks can out it, and there are a handful of other decks around that can get around this or force out this effect activation, so further plays can deal with the Gyos, but it is at the very least a card you have to respect. This card is really, really good. Moving on, we've got a copy of Big Eye as our other rank 7 that's worth playing. There aren't really that many, but Big Eye is a phenomenal card. We've got a Bahamut Shark because I want to mess around with Bahamut Shark, summoning out Abyss Trite or Acid Golem of Destruction for the creature swaps in the side deck. We're on a copy of Maestroke because it's just like one of the best rank 4s in the format. A Daiguster Emerald because, much like Avarice, we just dump a bunch of monsters into the graveyard. An Abyss Dweller because it's generally a really good card and can trigger our Atlantean Dragoons. The Acid Golem and the Abyss Trite for Bahamut Shark reasons. A Zen Mains to keep ourselves alive. Same with the Kachigachika and Tetsu. Onto the side deck, we've got just 2 sets of hand traps that are decently strong. Maxi and DD Crow. 4 different matchups, 3 copies of Creature Swap for a couple of reasons. One, because giving your opponent an Abyss Land and then you running over it will give you a special summon of a Mermail from your deck, which is pretty funny. Acid Golem of Destruction, you can give a summoned copy of Acid Golem that is summoned off of Bahamut Shark with no materials, and then give it to your opponent using Creature Swap so they cannot attack. And they cannot special summon any monsters while it's on field, and there's no really good way of outing it. The Abyss Trite for a very similar reason to Lind, except instead of summoning from deck, it summons from a Mermail from your graveyard. And then we're also on 3 copies of Mind Crush, just because it's good into Spellbook and Mermail Mirrors, and 3 copies of Shadow Imprisoning Mirror for the dark matchups. I think this could probably be something else, but for now, it's fine. With that said, though, I have yapped for quite a long time about this deck, so let's see the best deck of the room in the action, shall we? All right, we're in with some games, and we've got Mermail into Spellbook. This is a matchup that I personally like quite a lot. It feels very interactive, and both decks, I think, have a lot of really interesting things to do in the matchup. We are going first with a pretty phenomenal opening here, honestly. Teus, Dragoons, Marksman, Lind, and an Abyss Sphere into our opponent's double secrets, which aren't both live at the same time. Power, Upstart Goblin, and Summoner Monk. Just going by the opening hands, this should be our game to win, so let's see what we've got here. We're going to draw into a gun, which is like an even better draw than it even could have been. We're going to go the Teus and the Goons effect. Goons is going to search out a Megalo, and Teus is going to grab us a Abyss Pike. We're going to use the Megalo to pitch both the Pike and the Gun. To summon out the Megalo and then trigger the Gun in graveyard. To summon out the Pike from graveyard, we're going to go the Megalo to get a second Abyss Sphere, overlay the 2 into an Abyss Gyos, and set this Abyss Land and the Abyss Sphere and pass it over. Our opponent's going to draw into an Effect Failure just a turn too late, although I don't think it really would have mattered all that much. They're going to go this Upstart Goblin to get a copy of Fate into their hand, and then go Secrets. Secrets is going to get them a Blue Boy to their hand, and they're going to do a Blue Boy, which is going to be checked by our Gyos, which are going to negate that. They're going to go Power. power is going to enable them to get over our Lind. They're going to trigger the power as we trigger the Lind. Lind is going to summon out a Megalo, and they're going to get a search off of power, which is going to be the Master. They're going to do the Master to copy the secrets in Graveyard to get them a copy of the Grand Spellbook Tower before setting this fate and passing over to us. I'm going to be so for real. I think in this turn, we probably could have killed them, but if I remember correctly, I misplayed the hell out of this and missed lethal, so we're going to see what I do. Deep Sea Diva is going to be our normal summon here, which is going to be met by this effect Veiler. Oh, no, it is this turn. Okay. So I actually have a really interesting line here. We're going to go Turge, which is the wrong thing to do, and I'll explain why in a moment. And then we're going to use the Diva and the Pike after we use the Turge to send the Marksman to pop this face-down Fate. To make a Duloran. They're going to banish our Gaios here. And then we are going to go the... Oh, never mind. Not this. I'm lying. I did not do that. Never mind. We're just going to swing lethal. What? Not lethal. Sorry. We're just going to swing it for a huge chunk of damage. I think So the line that I had there, which would have worked, is instead of going Turge to get the guy out of my hand and into the graveyard, the answer there was actually going into Duloran, and instead of going into Turge there, we go into Gund, and we bounce two-hand both the Megalo and the Gund, and then use the Megalo in hand to pitch both the Gund and the Marksman, thus doing functionally the same thing that we did before, popping down that face down, but we do get the Gund effect to summon out another Mermail in our graveyard, which, if I'm not mistaken, does give us exactly lethal because the Duloran will be 3k. We'll have the Megalo, and then we could summon out the other Megalo in graveyard to, I believe, just kill them. I might be mistaken on that, but I'm pretty sure we get pretty damn close. Regardless, that's not what happened here, so instead, we're just going to make a Bahamut Shark detach and make an Abyss Strike for some follow-up for the next turn. Our opponent's going to find a Secrets off the top and then go the Tower to shuffle back this Fate and get this Temperance of Prophecy. They're going to go the Secrets to get themselves a copy of Master before triggering the Temperance. Temperance is going to summon out the High Priestess. They're going to go the Master. Master's going to get them a power. And we're going to go High Priestess, or they're going to go High Priestess to kill our Bahamut Shark. They're going to go the power to boost up over our Megalo. They're going to trigger the power to get a Fate to hand, which is going to be a pretty clean way of outing this trait. We're going to go in main 2 as they attempt to go to end phase, this Abyss Sphere to go into Abyss Lind, which is then going to trigger the Abyss Sphere, summoning out a Abyss Teos using the Lind effect. We're going to find an MST off the top, and in main 1, we're just going to hit that Spellbook of Fate. Not really a great reason to utilize it here. We could have, I think they only had 2 targets in graveyard, so no banish for them here, and flipping them face down wouldn't have done anything. So we're going to walk the Trite into the High Priestess of Prophecy, get this Megalo back, and then go into Big Eye. Big Eye is going to steal that High Priestess of Prophecy, so we don't have to worry about it in the following turn, and it's back to our opponent. They're going to go the Grand Spellbook Tower, shuffling back this Fate and drawing into a Veiler. Again, just a turn too late. They're going to go that Spellbook of Secrets to get Blue Boy. Blue Boy is going to get Fate, which is now live. They probably should have activated that in that moment to get the Big Eye off field, but I believe they were trying to like protect or try and just like bait this out using the Big Eye effect and then Veiler the Big Eye effect, because that is the only way that they survive. And it does happen. We do go for the Big Eye. And they Veiler us, and they can use the Fate to banish the High Priestess of Prophecy, thus keeping them alive. And then they have a Judgment for our Deep Sea Diva, which would have wrapped the game up. So it's back to them. They're going to find a High Priestess of Prophecy off the top, go to the Grand Spellbook Tower to get another draw, which is going to be another Grand Spellbook Tower. They're going to normal summon the Summoner Monk. Summoner Monk is going to pitch the tower. They're going to make a Magical Exemplar, and they're going to make a Maestro. If only the Spellbook player was running Gaga Cowboy. It's a card that would have won so many games, would have won this game for the Mermail player too, but we're not currently on it, so it's a little unfortunate. We're going to draw into a Pike, which isn't really worth normal summoning. We're going to walk over the Blue Boy and then pass to our opponent, who's going to find an Upstart Goblin that's going to put us to 8k. They're going to find a Monster Reborn off the top, which can reborn the Bahamut Shark and crash over our Big Eye, opening our board up. We're going to find another Pike. Not really much of a reason to go in here. We're just kind of waiting for a good discard fodder, and they don't really have much of a reason to do anything either. We do find Gun, which is pretty phenomenal. We're going to go Pike, Pike get Marksman, and then we're going to use the Gun effect to get these Megalo. Megalo is going to tribute the Abyss Pike to walk over the Maestro's both materials, so it can no longer protect itself. They're going to find an Eternity off the top, go to the Eternity. Eternity is going to get secrets out of the banishment. They're going to go the Star Hall. Star Hall is going to activate. They're going to go secrets. Secrets to get a Blue Boy. Blue Boy is going to normal summon and get to deck to hand a copy of Fate, which they're then going to pass over to us. We're going to find a Lind up the top. We're going to go a Pike. No targets left in deck, unfortunately. That Lind was our last target. They're going to go the Fate to set their Blue Boy face down and trigger it, getting themselves a copy of Eternity. But unfortunately, that draw into a second High Priestess does not quite do it. They are one spellbook short, and they've got nothing to really do here. So they're going to go Secrets. They're out of Blue Boys in deck. They're going to go the Life to get the Temperance. And really unfortunate thing here, no High Priestesses left in deck. 2 in hand and 1 in the banishment. So we're going to go to game 2. I'm not going to lie, I'm really sad we didn't get to show off the Duloran thing in the previous game. I think that line would have been so sick to show off. I love Duloran in this deck. It is such an interesting play around, and I think it's a really fun flex with Deep Sea Diva and like the numerous 4s that you summon out. I think it's a really cool card to have access to, and in the moment, I just kind of messed up the line because I didn't see it, which honestly just comes down to a skill issue on my end. I just did not see the line in the moment, which, you know, is a little unfortunate. Unfortunately for us, this hand looks like giga ass. Double Lind, Avarice, Marksman, and MST is like maybe the worst grip it could have possibly been into a spellbook player who has opened the nuts. So we're going to see what happens here. They're going to find a Temperance and then just rip this High Priestess. They're going to normal summon out this Blue Boy, get themselves a Master before going Secrets. Secrets going to get a Star Hall. Star Hall's going to activate, and they're going to go this Master. Master going to copy Secrets to get them a Grand Spellbook Tower and a couple of counters on the Star Hall. They're going to set the Wisdom and the Fate and pass it to us. We find a creature swap. We're going to rip this MST, which is going to force out this Fate because we did target it down, and they're going to flip their Magician of Prophecy face down. Unfortunately, because they have 2 monsters on this field, this creature swap is doing a whole lot of nothing. And this is probably just on me. I probably just shouldn't have sided into the creature swap. But in my mind, if we could have just like stolen their one singular spellcaster on board to turn off Fate, that would have been really slick. But didn't really play out in this game. So we're just kind of going to pray to God that we can do something here. But swapping this Lind for a copy of the Magician of Prophecy that is now face down is kind of like the worst case scenario. They're going to draw for turn into a Power, which is maybe the best thing in their deck. They're going to find another High Priestess and then go Power. Power is going to boost up this copy of High Priestess before the Temperance gets them another one. They're going to pop the spell Magician of Prophecy and then just walk in for an insane amount of damage, killing us in 1 turn. I thought we were supposed to be the OTK deck. What happened here? Just a series of extremely unfortunate events. Game 3 time. All right, the hands are looking a little more even this time around. No huge brick from the Mermail player, thankfully. Unfortunately, that is just kind of like the name of the game sometimes with Mermail. You do just brick sometimes. And it's honestly one of the reasons why I think it is more worth to look into the Gen X version of this deck, because Undyne is such a good way to unbrick yourself. But at the end of the day, it's 3 cards in 40. You're not always going to find it, even in those scenarios. Like, if we had just replaced the Undynes with the Deep Sea Divas in that previous hand, it still wouldn't have fixed anything. So, at the end of the day, it is what it is. Sometimes you're just going to brick. That's Yu-Gi-Oh! That's how it is. Our opening hand this time is looking a little better. We've got Gund, Pike, and Teus, which is pretty solid for a Mermail lineup, with a Dark Hole and an MST into our opponent's Justice, Spellbook of the Masters, Spellbook Star Hall, High Priestess of Prophecy, and a Power. So let's see what we've got here. We're going to draw for turn into a Veiler. We're going to use this Teus to pitch this Abyss Pike, and then go the Teus to search out another Pike. We're going to go Pike to pitch Gund. We're going to get to our hand a Marksman and trigger the Gun to summon out this Abyss Pike before making a Bahamut Shark and going into Abyss Trite and then setting this MST. They're going to draw into a Maxi for turn. Just a little too late, unfortunately. They're going to go High Priestess of Prophecy because they have 3 Spellbook spells in their hand, and then go the Spellbook of Power to boost it up even further, before then going Master to copy the Power to boost it up even further. We are going to protect our MST from the High Priestess here because we know they have a Spellbook Star Hall in hand. Although not knowing that they have a Justice is probably going to be the thing that ends up losing us this game. This Veiler could have been significantly more impactful if we just let this go, but no way of knowing what was in their hand apart from the Star Hall, which we saw. So It is what it is. We're going to negate that effect, and they're going to go the Spellbook Star Hall. We're going to pop that before it can do anything, and then they're going to walk over our Bahamut Shark to get double searches off both Power and Star Hall. And this is kind of one of the reasons why I don't even know if the Justice of Prophecy being negated here would have mattered all that much, because they still get 2 searches off of both Power and Master. This is just kind of a crazy open from them. They're going to find a Fate and a Grand Spellbook Tower. They're going to activate the Grand Spellbook Tower and set the Spellbook of Fate. And then they're going to go the Justice to get a High Priestess and a Spellbook of Secrets to hand. We're going to attempt to rip this Dark Hole to try and get a little bit of advantage on our board while also clearing theirs out by popping our Trite to get a summon out of the graveyard. But they're going to rip this Spellbook of Fate right now, banishing this Trite from our field, which is going to give us functionally nothing. We're going to go this normal summon of Marksman. Marksman's going to walk in for 14 and then summon out Dragoons from the deck, giving them 1 more draw. And we're going to sink in 18 with the Dragoons. We're going to pass to them. They're going to find a Blue Boy off the top, and they're going to shuffle this Fate back in for a life. They're going to go Secrets to get Star Hall. Star Hall's going to activate, and they're going to go the Blue Boy. Blue Boy is going to get them a copy of Eternity. And then because they have 3 Spellbook spells in hand, they can summon out this High Priestess, and then go Eternity to get this Master, and then the Master is going to copy the Secrets for a Power. They're going to go the High Priestess to pop down our Dragoons, go the Power to boost themselves up even further, and then walk over our Marksman before triggering the Power to get another Fate, and then walk in for 8. Really, really bleak scenario for us here, but we've got 1 more draw on us. We've got a Pot of Avarice, which is maybe the perfect draw. We're going to shuffle 5 back into the deck, getting a Teus and a Deep Sea Diva. God, if that wasn't Fate back there, this game is so won, but unfortunately, a Banish is just so difficult to play through with not enough cards in our hand. We're going to go Teus Pitch Goons, which is phenomenal. We're still going to get a lot of advantage off of this. We're going to get Megalo and a Gun here. We're going to go the Megalo, pitch both of them to go into Megalo, and then Gun triggering the effect in graveyard to get Pike. They're going to banish our Megalo from field using the Fate before we summon back this Pike, and we're going to get the Megalo search for an Abyss Sphere. Abyss Sphere we're going to set and just pray to God that it's enough to get us through this turn. But them drawing into a High Priestess of Prophecy and also another Spellbook spell, so it's online, is probably the death knell for us. They're going to go Secrets to get Blue Boy to then get Master. That doesn't even need to activate here, if I'm going to be honest. They're going to go the High Priestess of Prophecy to snipe down that Abyss Sphere, which in theory is bad for them, but they have another High Priestess pop, so it doesn't really matter all that much. They're going to go this Master to copy Secrets to get another Fate into the rotation. They're going to go this second copy of Prophecy to pop down Arteus, and then walk in for lethal. Okay, I promise I do not have an objective. I'm not trying to make the meta decks lose their best of 3s. I know it's happened 2 videos in a row. I promise I'm not trying to. I am just a really mediocre Mermail pilot. If I'm going to be super frank with you, I am not that good at this deck, but I wanted to show it off. And I do like piloting it. It is still fun for me to practice it. And I'm definitely getting better. I'm noticing lines as I watch these replays back that I did not see in the moment, like that Duloran line in game 1. And I'm sure I could have had a way to win that game 3, if I just conserved my resources a little bit better. And also maybe touched up this extra deck a little bit more, but we'll see going forward. At the end of the day, I still really like this deck. Even though it lost to Spellbook is another one of the top decks in the format. I think it losing that set is not like saying that Mermail is bad by any means. If anything, it is saying that I am a bad Mermail pilot. And that's fine. You know what? That's totally okay. There are going to be better Mermail pilots out there than me. I think most of the people that are repeatedly playing this format are better Mermail pilots than I am. And again, that's okay. If you want to see someone who is definitely better at Mermail than me go through a deck profile of this, Caleb.exe does have a really solid Mermail profile. I mentioned in the intro to Meadowlands that it is a Gen X Mermail deck profile. I lied. I was mistaken. Caleb has been playing Gen X Mermail for a while, but that deck profile is old enough that it is our old pure Mermail list, which still a totally fine deck. It's very similar to this one. I think I've changed a couple of cards around since then, but all in all, these cards are still phenomenal. They're like, you can build them a million different ways. You can also play, I'm not currently on it, but you can play Abyss Lead for its hand rip. You can also play Mulan Glacia again for its hand rip. These are cards that you have access to and you can play. I know a lot of the format library tournaments are on builds like these that are using the Mulan Glacia and the Abyss Lead for those extra hand rips. They're playing a little bit more for the Mermail mirror. And I think this deck could be a little bit better built for the Mermail mirror. I think the creature swaps could maybe come out for something a little more targeted, because while I do like the creature swaps for like the kind of gimmick that they have with them, and I do think it is good into certain matchups, I don't think it is good enough into everything that it is worth it. So that's maybe a change to be made in the future. But that said, I have been here for quite a long time already, and my voice is kind of getting shot. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you all so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I know this was a longer one, and I think Mermail absolutely deserves that longer runtime, because this is just the poster child of the format. It makes sense. And even if I'm not the best pilot at it, I think I still have a lot of fun playing it, and I am still happy to show it off, even from my mediocre point of view at it. So with all that wrapped up, I'm going to hop out of here, and I will see you all tomorrow for the next scrapyard. Bye-bye.